Murray. I think even if the Giants had the number one pick, there is no way he would have taken him. He wanted an Eli Manning-esque look to that quarterback. 6'4" plus, and the fact that he went through the same coaching tree as Eli Manning did, I think that's why he fell in love. He's still in love with Eli. He just wants the next version of it.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would help. That's why I think it was Oakland or bust. And if you got past Oakland, that's why I felt like there was really nobody else.
All right, we can talk about that more in a minute with Daniel Jones, because I think that pick at least it surprised me. And maybe if I knew more about Gettleman, it wouldn't have surprised me as much.
I think it surprised everybody that he went at 6. So let me pose it to you this way. Who had the more puzzling draft to you, Oakland or the Giants?
Gosh, I mean, can we just put them in a room and let them fight it out?
Or C, both.
Yeah, C. I'll take all of the above. I'd have to say at the number 4 pick, when you're reaching for Clelin Ferrell, when there are other guys out there that, even if your strategy is to take the best available player on the board, even if it doesn't meet a definite team need, a lot of teams say, okay, in the top 10, if it's close to a team need or not quite a team need, but this is definitely the best available player in the draft, we're going to take him. I think Oakland had that opportunity at 4, and they take Clelin Ferrell. I mean, you had inside linebackers still there. You had outside linebackers there. Even the Lions pick up a tight end in Hawkinson that a lot of people feel like is a talented tight end. And we see what a couple of teams can do when their tight end is just heads and shoulders above everyone else. Obviously, the name Gronkowski comes to mind, but then what the Chiefs can do with Kelsey and now with Kittle. You know, if you have a top 3 tight end, that can really be a game changer in your offense. So even if they reach for Hawkinson, I can kind of see it a little bit more than Ferrell. I mean, not saying anything against the guy. Great defensive end at Clemson, but maybe not even the best out of the defensive players from Clemson in this draft. And they reach for Clelin Ferrell at 4. To me, that's a big surprise. But when you're the Giants and you've been through everything you've been through, we know that Eli Manning had his consecutive game streak robbed when he had to sit for 1 game. And then he ends up coming back and being the starter for another 19 years. It seems like after that, it seemed like a lifetime. Obviously, it's not very long after that, but the way he played last year, it seemed like a lifetime. Then you go out and say, okay, we're going to take a quarterback from Duke. I mean, this isn't a quarterback from the SEC. This isn't a quarterback from a big name school. Yeah, he might have performed really well at Duke, but I think this guy is a risk. So you're on the cusp of being done with Eli Manning, being through a couple of tough years, and then investing in a guy like Daniel Jones, who at the number 6 pick, if he's a bust, that's a big problem for the Giants because you're already only 1 year removed from taking Saquon Barkley when everybody else thought you maybe should have taken a quarterback at that time and then addressed your running back needs later. They take Barkley last year. Yeah, he had a great year, but you still don't have the solution at quarterback. And now you take Daniel Jones. It's intriguing to me. And so I say put him in a room and flip a coin because I'm not sure which one of those moves is going to look worse in the long run.
I thought the Giants would get Jones at 17. When you started connecting all the dots,
he probably would have been there.
I thought they just would have grabbed him at 17. It seemed like Washington really liked Haskins. Now there was reports that the room was sort of torn, but it felt like Dan Snyder wanted Haskins. Then they sit there and watch the board, and once they got past Denver trading out and Cincinnati at 11, not going quarterback, like he was still available. So I don't think the Redskins were going to take Daniel Jones. I think the fact that Haskins was a local guy from Maryland, it came out that like Snyder, that was the only interview he sat in on for all the pre-draft stuff that Washington did. He went out and watched this kid play, I think back when he was still in high school. There was a lot of information out there that just felt like Washington was going to take Haskins, not Jones. So that's why I thought at the beginning of the day, like, okay, now the way that the board has gone with what Oakland has done, you've got Josh Allen and you've got Ed Oliver sitting there at 6. The Giants defense desperately needs people in the front 7. And then you can turn around then at 17 and go get your quarterback. And instead they do the opposite thing. I think they panic and go get Jones at 6. I think they liked him so much. They felt like, well, if we like him this much, someone else has to like him too. I don't think that's what happened. I think you saw it with Drew Lock. There was enough question marks out there, and in almost every single mock or ranking of players, Locke was ahead of Daniel Jones. And the buzz for those guys really had died off. Haskins was rumored to be moving up Oakland's board, and then, of course, Washington and Denver had some rumors about him. But you never really heard much about Locke, and you never heard much about Jones. It was like, well, would one of these guys go in the 20s to the Packers or the Patriots or something like that? And then the Giants jump up at 6 and get him. So it was another move where the Giants could have added a game-changing type of player in an edge rusher in Allen or a guy in Oliver that could have played in their system as well. and still gotten Jones, I believe, at 17. Or we saw with Denver, they were willing to move up and they didn't get a ton. They got an extra second and a third next year. And the Giants jumped back into the first and gave up those kind of picks anyway. So they clearly had those picks. I'm sure Denver would have taken the 37th pick in the second round and a third next year to move back to 17. And they could have gotten Jones and still had a really good defensive player. They just messed that up with taking Jones in 6. And again, it's almost like what we saw with Tebow years ago. You take these guys way before you should, and you just put a ton of pressure on them because now you've used one of your biggest assets, and then you're going to be sitting there watching Allen and Oliver for the next few years. And if those guys are studs, it's going to look that much worse for the Giants. So I felt they really messed it up. But yeah, when you look at what Oakland did at 4, I thought the fans' face of like, who? Who did we just take?
Yeah.
And now you know why Gruden sent everybody home. Because if this got leaked out, it would have been the laughing stock of the draft. They would have been getting blasted the week leading up to it. I think that's why they really sent everybody home. So it was just him and Mayock that sort of knew what direction they were going. And again, it's not to say that Farrell's not going to be a great player. It's you might have been able to get that guy at 24. And instead, now you've taken him at 4 and you took a running back in the first round. How many great running backs have we seen come day 2 in this draft or even day 3? You don't need a first round running back. They just didn't follow the board. I know that when you see guys like Kuiper and McShay and Daniel Jeremiah and all these guys, that's all they do. They're on the phone with executives and scouts. That's how they build their board of what they're hearing. And when those guys have someone like Farrell down into the 20s, I don't think other teams are like, oh, yeah, we're just hiding him and lying about him. Like, everybody was pretty consistent on having him between like 20 and 30. And the Raiders take him at 4 with the amount of talent, especially on the defensive side that was still there. So, yeah, you might be right. There might just be a tie for stupidity in the first round of this draft because unless these guys work out, this is going to be a bad look for them.
Definitely. And I'm not saying teams have to follow like a guy like Mel Kiper and his draft board, but at the same time,
if you're 20 spots off, Eric, that's a huge reach.
Exactly. And Mel Kiper's been doing these mock drafts before the internet was invented. In fact, I think he was doing these mock drafts before the NFL was invented. It seems like the fact that they reach for Clelin Ferrell at 4 is just so far outside of the box. It makes you wonder, what are they doing in Oakland? I mean, Gruden, I know he's unorthodox sometimes. And I know with Mayock there, it's like, okay,
that's an understatement.
You want to see some change, but is this the way to accomplish it when you have so many other things that you could do that kind of get this franchise back on its feet? I'm not really sure what they did, but Justin, a couple of points just as we look through some of the things that we've talked about and just a couple of rebuttals. I didn't want to interrupt you there, but talking about Kyler Murray, I still think that the Bengals are a team that maybe would have grabbed a quarterback at 11 if something fell to them that they felt was worthwhile. The fact that they didn't take Haskins, though, does make me then wonder if they would have even taken Murray. Maybe not. Maybe a guy like a offensive tackle. I don't know why a tackle moves the needle for a team like the Bengals, but apparently it does. I mean, I guess you can give the Red Rocket more protection to be awful. And I'm sorry to one of our listeners that was tweeting me last night. He's a friend of mine, and he's a huge Cincinnati fan, and he's aware that he's been through a couple of tough decades there. But you also mentioned the name Drew Lock, and I do want to bring that back up because one of the other big surprises to me was at pick 32, and I know it's hard to say there's any big surprises when you are a Super Bowl team and you have pick 32, but the Patriots, they give Jimmy Garoppolo away a couple of years ago for a bag of chips, a 6-pack of soda, and maybe $1,000 of cash. And you think, okay, Tom Brady's going to play another couple years. Now, Drew Lock falls to you at 32, and I'm not saying that Drew Lock is the answer to all answers. However, you've now gone 31 picks ahead of you. No one has taken what could be a decent QB off the board. At least put a guy behind Brady that is either a formidable backup or could be the next heir apparent for at least 5 to 10 years as you figure things out, and they skip him. The Patriots baffle me sometimes, and it just makes you wonder. I guess it's hard to argue with them. They're a dynasty, but sometimes their draft strategy is so far beyond my understanding of how things should work that either I'm really stupid and they're geniuses, or the Patriots just baffle everybody and get really lucky every year. I don't know. What was your take on them taking a wide receiver rather than saying, oh, there's a good quarterback here, let's take him and set him on the bench, because I guess they think Brady's going to play until he's 65. I mean, when he gets to actual Social Security retirement age, I think that's when Brady's done.
I wasn't surprised, to be honest with you. When you look back at who they've drafted, it's all been second round or later for them, for quarterbacks that they've been able to develop through their system. And you can go through the list of them. So I wasn't surprised they didn't stick their neck out in round one. And really, wide receiver is a position of need for them, for sure. But they haven't been that successful. Belichick has missed on a lot of wide receivers, so I don't know if that's a good thing for N'Keal Harry or not. But I think that Friday night, rounds 2 or 3, you could see the Patriots make a move for a quarterback, or I wouldn't rule out them trading for Josh Rosen. I don't think the Cardinals have any leverage now.
Yeah, they're not desperate, right? If that's their strategy, was to take Murray, they're not going to be able to play the desperation card.
No, the Los Angeles Chargers have already said they think Rivers has at least 2 years left. So then of that 5-year Rosen deal, you're only getting that discount that we talk about of taking a quarterback young and having that 5-year window. Now you're only in really 2 years of it, and that 5th year is going to be a much higher rate than years 1 through 4. So I really look at Miami and New England as the only 2 teams that really have an interest in Rosen. When you look at what everybody else has sort of done, maybe the Bengals jump in, but they haven't even been rumored to be looking. And like you said, they passed up on Haskins, a guy that was in Ohio. You talk about another team that's on the road to becoming the Cardinals, of just a roster that doesn't really have a lot of talent on it. AJ Green is getting older. Dalton is starting to come to the end of his contract, and he really hasn't had a lot of success there and no success in the playoffs. They passed on an Ohio kid that at least I think fans could have gravitated towards, and a guy that I would have to think that's similar in terms of what Jared Goff is. Not a super mobile guy, stays more into the pocket. You felt like Zach Taylor could have worked with Haskins in that system and had somebody to come in there and sort of take the reins over from Dalton, but they don't go there. They don't go lock. So, yeah, I look for either the Patriots or the Dolphins Friday night to make the move for Rosen. And it'll just be, is it a second-round pick? Is it a high third? Is it a third and a fourth? Is it some combination? But I think now the Cardinals have lost a lot of leverage because a team like the Giants were interested. Well, the Giants can't be interested now when you've got Eli and Jones there. They have no quarterback need. Denver's got a quarterback room that's now filled up. They've passed on quarterbacks. Locke is still out there for somebody to go get, so that could be another where a Miami could go get him in round 2, or New England could jump up. Well, they have a ton of picks. They can move themselves around in round 2 and make a move to get him there. So I think it'll be really interesting Friday night. When you get to rounds 2 and 3, you still got Will Grier on the board for West Virginia. Like I said, Locke is still there, and you've got the trade for Rosen. So there's still 3 potential opportunities for a team like New England or Miami. So I think there'll be some news on that front in rounds 2 and 3.
I think that's a good point. I guess Rosen, if he does end up going to the Patriots or a team like Miami or something like that, I think it makes sense at that point for those teams to have drafted the way they did in round 1. But I still think that's giving up a known quantity for an unknown quantity. And the other thing is, a lot of people felt like the second round was the round of wide receivers. And so I don't know that the Patriots needed to necessarily take N'Keal Harry at the 32 pick unless they thought he's definitely the best wide receiver on the board for them at that time, and they couldn't really risk having him fall any further than that. The other teams I want to talk about, Justin, before we wrap up segment 1 here, and I know you're the host and you're driving the bus, but I've got to talk about this because I'm not sure if you're going to bring it up. The Denver Broncos traded out of the 10th pick down to the 20th pick. They got Noah Fant from Iowa. It's another tight end, another great tight end. So that's 2 tight ends out of Iowa going in not only the first round, but the first 20 picks.
Who knew Iowa was a tight end factory?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, of course, I didn't watch a lot of Iowa football this year. Even being a Big Ten fan with Penn State, I only watched, the one game that matters. But again, Noah Fant goes to them at 20 then. As a Denver Broncos fan, are you happy with that? And are you happy with the fact that the Steelers taking Devin Bush at inside linebacker? And I'm not saying the Broncos necessarily would have taken him, but the Steelers seem to have come out maybe the better of the 2 teams in that trade because now they solidify inside linebacker. They've obviously already got TJ Watt. They're replacing Shazier, so there's obviously some emotional factor here. But Devin Bush, TJ Watt, They've got now a powerful linebacker crew, and of course they love that in Pittsburgh. They seem to have pleased their fans, but you, as a huge Broncos fan, are you pleased or confused with what's going on here with this move out of Denver?
Well, I wasn't surprised. I had heard some rumor that they might be interested in trading back, and I really thought when Schefter's report came out that they were looking for a first next year. If they got that, I was fine with moving back because I feel like they need draft